Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Core Opulence podcast. This podcast is hosted by me, Madison Miller, PhD student in soundscapes and photography and relaxation music. Even though my PhD is in soundscapes, photography, relaxation, etc., I think the purpose of this podcast is more of an extension of my PhD research and simply just sharing different ways of bettering yourself, whether that's academically or in your career or in your personal life. I think with this podcast, it's going to morph and change as we continue on with this journey, but for the most part, I think it's vital to kind of share my experiences and really showcase different ways of how to navigate the world and understanding your identity within all of that. So in this episode, episode 2, we are going to be discussing time management. And now time management may seem like a buzzword or something you might casually just put on your CV or resume, but I really want to dive into this concept of time management and really focus on, well, what does time management really mean? And in my opinion, I feel like time management is more to do with life management in general terms. If you're good at managing your time, perhaps you're good at managing your life. But when you really think about it, how many of us are really good at doing that or find ourselves successful with it? I think that especially whether you're trying to balance work-life balance, school-life balance, etc., it's really difficult to find time management strategies that work best for you, simply because you're so consumed with getting things done, staying on tasks, feeling tired or exhausted. It might be hard to kind of take a step back from your reality and say, these are the areas I need to focus on, these are the areas of improvement, etc. What I found really interesting is there was this research about developing a habit, and I'm sure all of us have heard, it takes 21 days to break a habit, only 21. Well, I hate to say it, but sometimes for some of us it takes longer. Sometimes it can take up to 200 days to break a habit, and I know I'm definitely one of those people. Especially, I was in the gym for about 6 months before I totally stopped going, and I was consistent for that 6 months, going 3 days a week. And for whatever reason, my workout routine just dismantled after the 6-month mark. And so it's just a matter of stepping back and seeing, okay, well, clearly I'm not the kind of person that can develop a habit in 21 days. Perhaps you guys are the same as me, and it takes a lot more willpower, energy, and effort, mental effort to get through this. In the study that I was learning about, where it could take up to 200 days to learn a habit, but the way they measured this information was by asking participants how easy it was for them to make these decisions, particularly taking walks after dinner. And they found that if you do it 85% of the time without thinking heavily about it, then you have officially developed a habit. So try to get to that point where at least 85% of the time you can achieve this routine that you're trying to establish for yourself. And in this case, time management strategies. I'm going to give some examples of my past life experiences to kind of showcase the importance of having this ability to self-reflect, step back, and realize things need to change with time management strategies. But I think before I do that, I want to talk about the significant impact it can make on your life. If you end up not managing your life in ways that are beneficial to you, you end up sabotaging yourself and your future. For instance, I heard this really interesting quote the other day. Where you're at now is because of decisions you made 3 years ago. And so if you're in a good space now, it's because you made a lot of decent decisions in your past that helped elevate you to get to this point. If you're not achieving your goals or in the place you want to be in your life right now, perhaps it's because the decisions you made 3 years ago have impacted your life to this degree. Now, of course, there's other factors outside of yourself that we can't really control, like coworker drama, like other environmental influences, etc. So, I'm willing to factor all of this into it, and I think you should too. Hold accountability for yourself, but in certain circumstances, you might have to realize, okay, well, maybe it's my environment damaging me or the people around me, in which case, that's another situation you need to tackle in order to ensure that you're in a healthy position moving forward. I think before managing your time or managing your life more effectively, if you're in a situation where you're in complete survival mode, wondering how you're going to pay your bills or how you're going to eat, or if you're going to have a roof over your head, obviously prioritize those basic necessities first and get yourself to a place where you have the basic needs being met in order to focus more on additional time management, life management strategies. And trust me, I've been there. So, one example of time management that I want to bring up is back whenever I was in my undergrad degree. Now, when I was doing my undergrad, I had a really unhealthy lifestyle, and a lot of it I felt I couldn't change. I was working 80 hours a week, and for Americans listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you know that this is not an exaggeration. I had two full-time jobs at that point, and I was taking 5 classes at university. Now, with university in America, not sure if my UK listeners know the difference, but universities in America, you're allowed to choose your classes. They're not chosen for you. And so I decided to take 5 classes in one semester, which is super full-time, and I'm not sure what I was thinking. Honestly, I just wanted to reach my goal of graduation by the age of 22. I didn't want to be seen as a failure. I didn't want to feel like a failure. I had this goal and I wanted to achieve it so badly. And so I was pushing myself to the absolute limit in order to do this. I really had tunnel vision at this time. I was really one-track oriented, and I didn't want to deviate from the plan. Now, I know that I'm susceptible to perfectionism tendencies, and I'm sure my listeners, if you guys have perfectionism in you, you know that this can be detrimental to your well-being, time management, etc. When you have an idea of who you are in your head and you try to work so hard for it, with this tunnel vision, you end up failing and sabotaging yourself in the process. So anyways, back to my story. Unfortunately, working these 80 hours a week was not healthy at all. I would pull all-nighters, I would drink insane amount of energy drinks, I would work 16-hour days, napping in my car in between shifts. And because school or university was relatively optional, even though I was paying to go there, I would often sacrifice my school days to sleep and recharge, and I would miss classes. And then on the days where I had to work my 16-hour shifts, I would stay up and try to socialize with my friends because I felt like my friendships were deteriorating, and I would feel guilty about not giving the attention that I wanted to my friendships. So then on that note, I would put my homework aside to maintain my friendships with others. And I just felt this deep, intense anxiety on a regular basis. My heart was pounding. I was worrying constantly. And I knew that I was struggling. I just didn't know how to get out of it. And like I said, I had tunnel vision, and it made it really hard for me to have that self-reflective moment and say, things have to change. I think I was in this mentality that in order to be successful in life, you have to suffer. And I carried that mentality with me for quite some time. And it's only taken the last few years for me to really step outside of it and see, you know what? I never needed to suffer to be successful. People around me don't need to suffer. And I think this is vital to us sharing our stories, is that, if we hear about other people and how they were able to overcome their difficulties in life, we can learn from them before we make those mistakes or get into those situations too. I think sharing stories is going to be helpful moving forward, especially when it comes to trying to get into a PhD program if you're interested in that, or learning what you want to do career-wise or anything. I think it's vital to find communities out there that are in your areas of interest, and so you can learn from other people's experiences. I find that it makes life less lonely whenever there's other people you can connect with. Anyway, once again, back to my story. So towards the end of the semester, I realized I was not doing well in my classes, and I was definitely struggling so much. It was to the point where I had received a letter from the university stating that they were essentially kicking me out. I can't exactly remember what the letter said, but they wanted to kick me out of university because I wasn't performing well. And before they kicked me out, I had to do an exit counseling session. And this is the first time I ever had experience with any sort of counseling or therapy. And I think the reason for this is because in my mind, I didn't have the money to afford counseling or therapy in the first place, so it never was an option for me. At the same time, because of the tunnel vision I had, and because I was never on campus, I could never have time to be on campus to really explore campus or understand, university culture, I never knew that counseling was offered through my university in the first place. So it's on one hand my fault for not taking the time to kind of open my eyes, broaden my horizons, and immerse myself in the university experience. But at the same time, perhaps their marketing or something could have been a little different. And maybe they could have contacted me before kicking me out saying, hey, we noticed your grades are slipping. Perhaps a counseling session or two will be helpful to you. So it's interesting. It's not that I'm a victim to my circumstances. It's that I need to hold myself accountable and take responsibility for the progression of my life. I think it's really important to take responsibility for who you are, who you were, and where you're going, and kind of let go of that guilt and shame that you associate with some of the decisions you made in your past. But I digress once again. This is about time management strategies. So even though I recognized it was my own personal fault for failing, I think I was still in tunnel vision mode even during this counseling session. So this exit counseling and session involved a psychologist basically sitting me down and saying, okay, why is it you're struggling? And so I was forthcoming and I explained, I work a lot. I took a lot on this year. I want to graduate by the age of 22. And I laid it down at their feet. And I think in these situations, it's very important to be honest, not only with your counselor, but with yourself. I know that some people in my life have lied to their counselors in the past, and it's a way of self-protection because they don't want to be seen as a failure. But if you're working with a trained counselor, they're going to help you through the situation. It's a non-judgment zone and everything is confidential. So I encourage you to open up and not lie or tiptoe around the circumstances, because the minute you're honest with yourself and accept responsibility, you can make proper life decisions moving forward that will benefit you in ways you couldn't possibly imagine, whether that's your physical health, mental health, life health in general, etc. So my counselor said, okay, so why are you working so hard? Why are you doing this? Oh, well, I can't afford life. I can't rely on my family. I moved out. I live by myself. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't. I was convinced I couldn't do a lot of things. I kept saying, I can't. And I don't think this is necessarily a low self-esteem talking. I think it's just being a product of my environment and being around people who also thought that in order to be successful, you have to suffer. And you don't need to do that. Let me reiterate again, you absolutely do not need to suffer in order to be successful. So I ended up having a panic attack in front of my counselor, and my heart was pounding. I was holding my chest. I was breathing in and out. I couldn't take this conversation because my counselor was offering me quality advice. Well, Madison, why don't you take a step back for a semester? Why don't you cut back with your job? And I'm like, what do you mean cut back from my job? I can't afford to cut back from my job. That's not a good idea. Or she would say, maybe try reapplying to university next year and we'll consider taking you back. What do you mean I have to reapply? I wanted to graduate by the age of 22 on this path I'm on now. It's not going to happen if you're kicking me out. And you know what? They kicked me out anyways. No pleading can fix a situation that bad. It's a matter of me taking responsibility and saying, wow, things need to change. So back onto time management. Now, like I said, time management is fused with life management strategies. And so in order for me to find time to take care of myself, to better my situation, I had to take that semester off of university. Now, I did take community college classes during that time. I only took 2 just to prove to my other university that I was capable of changing. But during that time, I was able to reevaluate myself, figure things out, and try to decide, what do I need to do to get back to university? What do I need to do to get back to my goal? First, change the goal. Allow adaptability. And so I decided, let go of this age of 22 graduation. It's not going to happen. I was dealt a different hand in life, and that's okay. I don't need to constantly compare myself to other people and where they're at. I can find success in my own time. The priority is myself and my well-being, and I need to focus on that. The next thing I decided was to cut back at my jobs. So I believe at that time I cut back to one full-time job and then a part-time job. I still couldn't cut out everything entirely with the financial circumstances I was in at the time, but I was able to reduce the amount of pressure from work simply by reducing my work hours. But that also included sitting down and budgeting and figuring out how much was coming in versus how much was going out, and what can I sacrifice in order to ensure my finances were being met. And that was also a really difficult thing. And I did this all by myself. I didn't ask for help. And I think that's part of the perfectionism within me, is that it's been very difficult for me to ask for help throughout my life. But the older I got, the more I realized that people are placed into your life for a reason. Life is about community and love and support. And so I'm less ashamed of asking for help now than before. So about time management. I think what happens in life are two different outcomes when it comes to time management. One, you either change on your own, under your own circumstances, because you recognize things are wrong. Or two, the universe forces you to change. And in my situation with my university and getting kicked out, that was my wake-up call, that was my rock bottom, and that was the universe saying, hey, you really need to change your life because the trajectory you're on right now is not healthy for you. And if I had the self-awareness before getting kicked out, I think I would have not been kicked out at all, because I would have been able to put these strategies in place beforehand. So I challenge you, if you're experiencing high anxiety situations right now simply because you feel like you don't have time to do anything, you're binding yourself to this idea, this concept of time. I need to get this done by 10 o'clock. I need to get this done by the age of 30. Anything to do with time, you need to kind of sit back and take an assessment of where you're at. And if you feel like getting a third party involved, perhaps going to a counselor, a life coach, or a mentor to kind of help you realize the areas in your life that need improvement, I highly advise that. As I mentioned, I believe that community can certainly help you through this situation, and perhaps you're not ready to open up to anybody in your life about your current problems. I think the first step to time management is simply just admitting you need help, you need support, or something needs to change. The second step is maybe finding people that have similar issues like you do and finding out how they got through them. So I really hope that this mini talk was able to kind of put things into perspective and showcase how important it is to take care of yourself. And once you're in a good place, that's when time management or life management simply becomes way more manageable. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye.